Hey guys, welcome back to another Weird Wednesday. I'm Ashers, and this is.
Pedo.
And also,
Alan in Greenfield.
oh my gosh, what a pleasure. We've only been trying to get you on for like the last month.
Yeah, well, there was that caving. I wouldn't call it an accident. I had a shelf come out from under me, and my back, I'm still wearing a back brace.
Oof.
Uh, I was fortunate that I was with two really, really good spelunkers, or I might still be down there with the Diro and the
Oh
Tiro.
no. It'd be a different show then, huh? Wouldn't it?
So I sort of I got in touch with my publisher and I said, cancel everything for August. I think I'm going to be in too much pain to do anything.
Oh my god.
But it's heroic, I mean, it was not like the Hellier people going into a cave and invoking Pan, which I don't really recommend. Also, abandoned mines are places. Problem saving local backup audio. Error, the men in black are coming.
I should be good on my end.
It-
I think, yeah, because that just means like we talked, like it's gonna afterwards, like we'll hang out and I'll download it from my side, so you should be good.
Yeah, anytime you want to hang out, I'm here, but I'm here like late, like night when, I come out of my coffin because the big yellow thing is not up in the sky.
That's okay. That's all right. Hey, you know what? We're just glad to have you here in general. So it's good to finally have you. Pato, did you have anything exciting happen this weekend?
Oh God, I don't want to waste any time talking about my boring ass life. The one thing I will mention, I did go to the Chicago Paranormal Convention, and I filmed some stuff with Leland Pearson of Questioning the Weird. That was interesting because I've done the paranormal conventions with the podcast, and those all seem to be kind of, when we did with Phil, that was UFO based. Marietta was kind of paranormally, but I feel like everything's been more, and I don't know if it's regional, has been more like UFO or cryptid based. And the one that we went to this weekend was a lot of like ghost hunters, and
Oh,
that's kind of like a different crowd, you know what I mean? I think
Sure.
yeah.
there's a really good joke to be written about the five kind of, seven types of people you run into at paranormal conventions, and like ghost hunters are definitely their own thing. But it was interesting to talk to these guys, and because number one, I found out that like people will pay them to do that. Like they'll send them into places that have like a lot of like supposed haunting activity with cameras, and they'll give them money to get in, and they'll give them money for their equipment and shit, just because they want to own the footage if they happen to capture anything. So I don't know how widespread that is, but talking to these guys, a lot of their investigations, yeah.
Yeah.
Or the cable or whatever we're using here.
I
So
know. They're really trying to kick you off. You must have some juicy information for us today.
happens all the time to me. And the book that Olive, my publisher, and I are working on right now is about the Black Lodge.
Ooh.
And it's a tough book to write because it's like the third in the series. Notice how I get my plug in for the complete secret
Absolutely.
cipher of the Ufonauts, available now in a combined edition.
There you go.
But one of the things we're including are my own encounters with the Black Lodge, which were pretty scary, but less scary than all the people that used to be famous in ufology and cryptozoology and all kinds of ologies who died under mysterious circumstances. And our criterion is, if they were like 85, we don't consider them particularly mysterious unless they got pushed out of a window in Moscow, which
Yeah.
happens a lot, I hear. It's called defenestration. I like the term. It sounds like something else much more sexual than, merited, because it just involves killing somebody by throwing them out of a high window, which must be a I don't know, a Eastern European custom, because that was when the communists, you remember them, took
Sure.
over Czechoslovakia. The prominent liberal leader there got thrown out of an eighth floor window, and they say he was defenestrated by the KGB,
Well,
which doesn't exist anymore, right? Right?
it,
Doesn't exist anymore.
it's a very lo-fi way to go about it, I guess. If you're looking to off someone, just find a tall. But William Forrester or Forrestal, or the right, he was the guy from the general that I don't know. You know who the hell he is, right?
He was an admiral, I believe.
Yes, that was involved in the early UFO stuff. He jumped out of a window. But I got to ask, like, you're right. A lot of people, a lot of your contemporaries did kind of have that fate. Does that leave you with survivor's guilt, or do you wonder, like, was I just that far off that I was never worthy of being killed, or do you just
The
think that
thought has occurred to me.
or do you, and it's not funny. I'm not laughing at it, but like,
Don't listen to me. I'm still alive.
yeah, exactly. Go read the papers of the people that were killed shortly thereafter. I'm
No.
obviously way far off base because I'm still alive and I'm still writing these things, right? But no, I mean that's gotta kind of. Does that ever make you question like what you're doing, like the fact that
No,
it's
I mean, I don't want to push this, but
sure,
I have pretty good survival skills, and they came close once.
yeah,
Is a long story involved there, but basically, this guy that looked like Charles Manson showed up at the lodge to which I belonged at the time and started to. This was like 1987, something like that, because the way I can date it is it was the time of the harmonic convergence, and he was pushing that. So I decided this guy is clearly trying to disrupt the work we're doing here. So I'm going to wait till he's leaving and pull a whammy on him. So he's talking about the date of the harmonic convergence, which is, like the 2012 thing. I've been through so many end of the world scenarios that if the world actually ended, I would be, whoa, I don't believe this.
Yeah.
Sort of the Christian Science of ufology and so forth. But in any case, I waited till he started to leave, got in his van. Of course, it was a van. And I said, well, it's very interesting, your doomsday scenarios. But of course, and I just took a date out of the air. April 4th, 1994. That'll be your day. And I had this menacing look on my face, and I could tell I got to him. So I thought, ha, 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 ha. I turned the tables. Well, a few months later, I was at some, it was called a Spiral Gathering at Hard Labor Creek State Park here in Georgia. Yeehaw! And he showed up there, and I thought, this is not good. Stuff's going to happen here. And it did. He apparently had done his circulation with these miscellaneous hippy-dippy people and announced that he was doing a raffle, and that he was raffling off a naked slave serving breakfast to one lucky person among those who, I'm not making any of this up, who would contribute to a fund that was to clean up Arabia Mountain. Now, Arabia Mountain in those days was completely obscure. I mean, even people that lived in the neighboring towns, Conyers, Georgia, and other places that are now absorbed into Atlanta, because Atlanta is a hydra and a vast amoeba. But even people that live there don't know about Arabia Mountain. And I do, because that's my power spot, and that's where the 10 years of the Great Arabia working, where I empowered whoever came there peacefully. And I thought, well, that's a signal this has to do with me, which means I will win the raffle. And sure enough, I won the raffle. The naked slave turned out to be a girl from some off OTO branch from upstate New York.
What'd you
And
have for
I said,
breakfast?
Yeah, was it good?
no, I gave it to my compatriots from the lodge
Throw
because
throw it to your
I
homies.
figured, yeah, let them be poisoned. You see,
Yeah,
that's why I survived.
right.
But that, oh yeah, Ron, go ahead and have food. It's okay. I'm not eating tonight.
See,
It's a fast day.
conventional wisdom would tell you never look a naked guest slave in the mouth. And Dr. Alan Greenfield, absolutely not. He threw this one back, catch and release. He's like, no, I don't want to eat this food.
Well, then my ex-wife number two was sleeping in the same room, so I thought it better to, not
Right.
give damaging. So it wasn't my extreme chastity or nobility. It was
Sure.
survival. Again, survival instincts. This time, my legally
Yeah.
survival instinct. Anyway, so later in this, uh, actually, I made out with that girl, but she had clothes on at the time. That was before the whole thing there. So I just remembered that part. It's the same person. There were hundreds of people there, so it's really uh, coincidental. Anyway, on the last day there was a dining hall, and I was on my way there, and there stands my Charles Manson clone out in front of it. And he holds out his hand, and because I am a Southern gentleman, I reflexively shook his hand. And he had a ring on that had, I mean, it's an old Borgia way of poisoning people. He had a pin on the inside of the ring, and he just touched it to my hand, and I thought, I'm dead. Maybe I should eat first. But nothing happened, and I thought it was a warning. We can get to you anytime we want to.
Right.
So on the one hand, maybe I do know a thing or three, but on the other hand, I got the warning. But from then on, uh, like Trump, God help me, I don't shake hands with people.
That's not a bad practice to take up.
Yeah, these days, I guess so.
Right.
Yeah.
I I think day after tomorrow, I get my fifth Pfizer TM
Oh, you getting your
Wow.
COVID shot.
getting your
Yeah,
DNA
because
upgraded? Is that
I don't know what it's doing to my DNA, but I know that being what was the term my father liked to use? An older fella, I uh, I feel like I ought to stay COVID free, and
Oh yeah.
knock on wood, I totally would rather risk the injections than. So I mean, I get flu shot every year, and
Right.
I knock on wood, I have never had a bad reaction to any vaccine, and I know other people who have,
Sure.
including one of my sons who had a bad reaction. Not anything,
My son did.
life threatening.
It's interesting you bring that up. My son did too, and they stopped just short of saying it was a COVID related injury. He recovered from it, but he was having like paralysis in like his eye, and he could see, but it's like he looked kind of like Sloth from the Goonies, and like his one
Mm,
eye was like that, and he was, but it was like a couple months and some prednisone, and it cleared up. And we went to an ophthalmologist and did a bunch of tests, and because of the timing was right around when he got his second shot, we thought it was because of that, and there was really no way to prove it. But it's interesting to me that a lot of people that would have prior to COVID been labeled kind of conspiracy theorists, a lot of them were more or less okay with the vaccine. I got it, and no big deal. But then there was a lot of people that before this and before kind of Trump weren't conspiracy theorists that now are very anti-vax, they're pro QAnon, stuff like that. And I feel like some of us that were in this mindset before, we were almost inoculated. We have pretty good bullshit detectors. We're like, we don't necessarily just take, the popular story or whatever. We have a tendency to kind of think for ourselves and do the research and all that, but we still more or less got the vaccine and went on about our lives. It's the people that kind of didn't spend a lot of time thinking about this stuff, that were radicalized by it.
Well, if you have any kind of pre-existing, especially pulmonary difficulties, or are over 50, or are there's some relationship between being overweight and mortality, it's very wise to get the vaccine, because percentage-wise, the likelihood of having some problem from vaccination and some problem from I mean, most people that get the flu,
Mm,
but a certain percentage of people don't make it through, and it's usually people who are older and people who have pre-existing conditions
mm,
and so forth. So it makes sense for some people. For other people, they don't need a conspiracy theory to say, well, this was a vaccine that is sort of ad hoc. I mean, most vaccines, they take years and years. On the other hand, the annual flu shot, because the flu is kind of a descendant of the Spanish flu that killed off so many people during World War One and kind of changed the world. They have to change the vaccine every year. And
mm.
I've never had an ill
Right.
reaction to that, but they do manipulate it. And anything that you put into your body, you should think about it. But then to become the government is making everyone sterile. Details at 11.
Jesus, I wish it would save me from getting a fucking vasectomy 10 years ago. You know what I mean? Why would, if I knew they'd be handing this shit out for free at some point, I would have fucking.
Yeah, well, do they? Is it free?
It should be. But what do I know? I'm just a woman. I'm not allowed to get abortions or whatever. But
Not anymore,
not
because
anymore.
the Supremes, baby love, my baby love, woo, 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 I need your love. Oh, the other Supremes. I'm sorry, I get them confused. An old band, obscure, and a group of old people, obscure. And Amy, Coney, whatever, the cultist,
Yeah.
the young cultist on the court. I really think that's a bad place to be. Of course, if I ever had anything that came up there, well, I'd be off to
The gulag. Right.
no, Central America is what I was going to say. Your Honor, I really need to go to the bathroom, and I'm gone. Shouldn't say that on the air. Don't quote me. Oh, yeah, it's too late.
We'll bleep that out in post. Don't worry about it.
No, you don't have to.
Ashes, did you have any news that you absolutely wanted to get to this week, or should we just keep on
No,
with the?
I did. I had one thing that I wanted to talk
Okay.
about. So I had a report of a deer person locally,
Oh,
like a
okay.
deer man. And I thought that was interesting. You know, a lot of people, there's a lot of infighting about the not deer and what that is, or even deer people in general. Deers themselves have been known to they'll walk upright sometimes, and when you see that, you see a big old buck with a big old rack on it walking upright. Yeah, it's horrifying, and your imagination could run wild. This person saw a two-headed deer walking bipedal, in the woods, and it was eating on something else, some carrion or something on the side of the road. So
And
that
you
was
said this was locally. It was in
this.
Ohio.
Yeah, this was, yep, this was local. This was in Ohio. You know, and I just thought that that was pretty neat. You know, I get tons of you know, hey, my house is haunted, or oh, I saw a Bigfoot, or even hey, I saw Dogman. I don't get a lot of Deer Man, so that was really cool. Um, I don't know too
What
much
part
about.
of Ohio, if I can ask, or if you know, did
So
this
this was
happen?
in the Miami Valley. I'm in Dayton, Ohio. And it was,
Ah,
yep, yeah,
Dayton.
yeah.
Yes, all of us old ufologists know all about
Oh,
Dayton.
oh
We
yeah.
even had our convention there once, which was interesting.
Maybe I should bring it back.
Usually it was Cleveland, but
Sure.
uh, Dayton was one of our annual events. And of course, we all know what goes on in the what's the hangar number?
Hangar
It's sort of
18.
like
Yeah.
hangar 18.
Yeah.
Jim Moseley, my old late friend, actually visited there and wrote a book called, well, actually Gray Barker wrote the book, but has Jim's name on it. It was just the way ufology was back in the day. But it describes Jim's real and authentic trip to Wright-Patterson. So all things are possible. But the reason I asked was because that particular form of shape-shifting, turning into a deer, is a standard first American way of shape shifting.
It's usually a woman, right?
And
Like the deer woman, or is
well,
the gender important?
almost, almost, well, yeah, because a doe would not have
The
prominent
antlers,
antlers,
right?
whereas a buck
Yeah.
would. But I don't know that anybody reports seeing a buck. So it's, I mean, because that's a either protected or prized target of those brave men with the great big tricked out AR-15s
Oh yeah.
with, or really with an M16 modified to shoot an animal that doesn't eat flesh. I was going to make that point. Deers do not eat meat. They're
No.
vegan, as
Yeah.
it were.
Yeah. They will chew
So
the
we are,
bones. That is something that they'll do for the marrow, but yeah, they don't eat meat. They're not
well,
dangerous.
yeah, well, that's, you know, uh,
It is
just,
interesting. The connection with deers that I've had in my life lately has been odd. For somebody that's grown up that have seen deer a lot in my life, it has been significant to me. You know, Ann and I, we saw Ann's my research partner. She was on the show. If you guys haven't listened to that, listen to it. But we saw a ghost deer in the TNT area in Point Pleasant. And now these deer people have been kind of popping up in my life a lot lately.
mm, that
So
is interesting. You
yeah.
didn't actually see this, though. You heard this particular story, right?
The two-headed deer, yeah, that's something that I did not see. It's just a report somebody passed on to me that saw it in the area. But the ghost deer, yeah, we saw we did see that. It's the only weird deer I've seen.
Mm. Well, if it was in the TNT area, you were in a portal, and lots of stuff comes through that portal in and out. Nobody
Yeah.
has uh, bothered to close that. I don't think anybody wants to. And it's been open since the 1960s, and weird things come out of it. My understanding is that all cryptids and all, we'll call them UFO beings, uh, are our inability to resolve with our
Hmm.
pretty primitive five senses what we're actually seeing. So we make it something familiar, but also that is influenced by our preconceptions and by our own way of looking at things. And the way I describe that is in terms of biological time. Human beings just came down out of the trees, stood upright, and said, "What's to eat?" and tried to avoid being that thing. And that's what our senses are for. Uh, 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 Bill Shatner said something very interesting just a few days ago in his new book, which I don't know the name of, so I'm not going to plug his stuff. But he said something very interesting. He said, when I went into space, I had a profound sense of sadness because I looked at the earth so full of life, and I looked at what he described as the abyss, which really the visible universe is something that a lot of astronauts have had uh, after effects from, because basically you're used to the sky being blue and the earth being largely green or blue, depending on where you are. And space, from the standpoint of our senses, is pretty empty. I mean, because actually it's not, it's just what we can attune to. I mean, there is no such thing as a void. There are virtual particles and quarks and things that link everything in the universe, really, but you can't see those. So it looks like an abyss. And what I was saying was, in terms of uh, biological time, we were born yesterday, and we're not really equipped to see whatever these things are coming in from
Yeah.
the 18th dimension, of which there are an infinite number. So we see what we can see, some equivalence. Um, and in terms of geological time, we were, 3 days old. And in terms of cosmological time, we're a blip, not even a second. So we're ill-equipped to contemplate what goes on in other realms of reality.
Yeah.
And so we see what we do,
Do you
Yeah.
think that we're a central point in creation, or do you think that we're just like a footnote? You know what I mean? When you talk about how biologically we've only been here such a short period of time, but yet we have figured out how to communicate or at least reach out to these things, or these things are reaching out to us. We're involved in we have a conversation with them. As one-sided as it may be at times, there's still something going back and forth, and it seems that we could almost be undeserving of that unless there's more to us. Like, are we just, I don't know. I guess, do you understand what I'm saying with that?
Oh yeah, I
Okay.
mean is Earth unique? And I would think that in the visible universe, we may be. There's all this stuff about exoplanets and the notion I've always found peculiar that flying saucers come from another planet, and sometimes ignorantly enough they say another galaxy, which is no conception of what distances there are between galaxies. But uh, I don't know where that occurred to people in 1947 at the time of the Kenneth Arnold case, because in truth, UFOs are only seen on or near the Earth. And there is no reason to believe, other than speculation, that they come from other planets, maybe other dimensions, because the way the quantum physicists put it, um, there are perhaps an infinite number of other dimensions, and they're right here, right in whatever space you're in right now. There's just an invisible barrier, which the current thinking is there's no way to penetrate it. I think it's penetrated every day, in terms of, there's that great scene in The Matrix where uh, a repeater, a cat walking across the room, tells Neo something is happening in the Matrix. It's a glitch. And I think that some of these are glitches, not intentional. And some of them are intentional, because if there are an infinite number of dimensions is the wrong word. Actually, the right word is brains, branes, not brains. But that being the case, whatever you can conceive of does exist somewhere, whether they come here or not. Are we special? I don't know. But we may be the only living planet in the visible universe. We may not be, but there are a lot of things that are not calculated in. Like towards the center of the galaxy, you can count all the stars and uh, uh, not realize that radiation becomes very intense. And then you get to the black hole at the center, apparently, of every spiral galaxy. And nothing that we can conceive of is alive in a black hole or even near it. They're stretched out to whatever infinity is. So you have that. You have all kinds of hostile elements in the universe. We just discovered that we're surrounded by asteroids and comets. And in the past, the only thing people knew about that was those that really, made a dramatic appearance in our skies. But the truth is, once we had spaceborne telescopes, every week in my news feed, I see asteroid coming to Earth, to which I reassure my readers, uh, we're a very small target,
Yeah.
Right.
and we get a hit maybe once every million years. So the likelihood of actually being in collision with anything larger than a meteor is very small.
Yeah.
And 10 years from now, it will become nothing because we just blew an asteroid
Yeah,
off of
about a
its
week
orbit.
ago.
Yeah, and that always precedes, developing a technology to do that with ease. And after the Webb telescope was launched, I can believe anything in our, shall we say, immediate vicinity is covered. And hopefully they have some anti-missile missiles, a lot of them, because we may be going to need them. I'm doing a long I Ching reading on that right now to decide whether, I need to pack up and go to Belize or someplace that is unlikely to be a target or
I
not.
thought we were going to Mexico. You have me excited about Mexico for a
You
minute there.
can't get to Belize without going through Mexico
All right.
on the Pan American Highway, or if there's a panic, I know back roads. And I'll be glad to tell you in my forthcoming volume how to survive a really, really big nuclear war and just die of the radiation a year later. No. I wouldn't write a book like that. I'm an optimist, sort of.
However, you did write a book called Saucer and Saucerers: The Stranger Than Fiction Story of UFOs and Those Who Chase Them. It came out earlier this year, and I
Hmm.
was I read a copy of it, and it was very kind of tying into what we talked about at the beginning of the show. It talks about a lot of shit, but um, the main thrust of the book is really where the modern what someone like me, and I'm 41, the UFO community as I took for granted, that just kind of existed as I came into knowledge of its existence. It was already there. I mean, it was founded by people. It was founded by like-minded people that were communicating through the comment section of magazines or whatever, writing letters back and forth, and then you guys would get together and you'd have these conferences. And these prevailing theories, one of which you just talked about, that UFOs come from different planets, like that was the stuff that we just kind of accept as part of the mythology, was laid out by people, early thinkers that were people that sat down and thought about this stuff, that looked at the evidence, that looked at the reports, and kind of started to put these theories together. And going back to the whole UFOs are from a different planet thing, I mean, you had contactees making those claims back in
Hmm.
the day. I mean, that people said that. People said that I talked to, and this is something we've brought up on shows in the past. How the early contactee movement was more. It was very personal. It was like, oh, I met an alien named Blorp, and he told me that he's a Venusian, and blah 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 blah, whatever. Right now, all the alien contacts, it's these faceless grays that maybe communicate telepathically or whatever. But the early days in the 50s, 60s, whatever, when people were running into aliens, they had names, they were from places. There was conversations, there was environmental warnings or whatever. And so that's where I'm not saying I think those people were lying, but this idea that UFOs come from different planets, I mean, it's not just something we like haphazardly came up with on our own. That was kind of the information that we were being fed, right? And
Yeah, that is true, but that doesn't mean that that was the source. The source, I think, preceded any of the contactee books. I guess the first was George Adamski's book, which was co-written with a real author from, I think, Desmond Leslie, and that was published in, I think it was 1954. And the extraterrestrial hypothesis, which is not a hypothesis, it's a speculation, goes back at least to Borderland Sciences Research Associates back in the 1940s when Meade Lane, who was also an occultist, I think the book was called The Coming of the Guardians, and it was a friendly alien from other planets notion. But that's based on trans-channeling, and trans-channeling, it goes from communication with deceased human beings to communication with demons, depending on who you're talking to. I mean, if you're talking to some fundamentalist, he'll say, those are all demons. If you talk to New Agey people, they say, no, I am raw. I mean, I know the people that did the raw communications, one of whom was an Eastern Airlines pilot who I knew quite well, flying by day and trans-channeling by night. But that particular group never claimed that what they were receiving necessarily was objectively true. They didn't make that claim. They did claim, and I saw this in person, so I know they could do that. Unfortunately, like other first-gen ufologists, they're all gone now, or virtually all gone. Some of these groups still exist, but they're in their like fifth or sixth incarnation. Fortunately, being a second-gen ufologist, I had the privilege of knowing a great many of those people. I mean, some of them, I could say I knew them, meaning I once shook hands with back when I shook hands. But so the people who are the really almost forgotten heroes are gone. And what's left is a rapidly diminishing group of second gen people, all of whom are in their 60s and 70s. And, we started out when we were 12 and 13 because Ray Palmer generously had a section in Flying Saucers magazine, which was a newsstand magazine back when there were newsstand magazines, other than Cosmo, of course, And, a UFO magazine would only sell, judging from Cosmo, that if it has the word sex or some variation of it 14 times on the cover, How to have better sex.
I like the quizzes so I can find out who I am as a person.
You miserable man.
Right. Tell me what I'm doing wrong when we take the quiz.
Yeah. Obviously, you are, well, what can I say? But anyway, he had a free column called Saucer Club News, and the scattered handful of people that were involved in organized ufology, if you want to call it organized, and I mean handful is like maybe a few hundred, maybe. That would be, including peripheral people. We're talking 1960s, early 1960s here. There was no internet. Long distance phone calls cost a fortune, and travel is very difficult when you're under 16 and don't have a driver's license. Fortunately, I had a father that had a Lincoln, and he was glad to take me to conventions because my mother liked to see this stuff because she thought it was all nonsense, but She had a fascination with nutty people doing nutty things. So we all went to Cleveland, and that went on for 50 years, 60 years. 60 years we did that convention every year, excepting 2001 because of 9/11. It was scheduled for 9/11. Actually, one year let me see, it was 2000. Yeah, we had the second convention that we had in New York, and where we had our dinner was in the restaurant at the top of the Twin Towers. So the convention was called off that year.
Yeah.
In deference to what was going on. And what can I say? We pioneered the flying saucer conventions. And now I never get invited to any of these weird things where I can make a little speech and sell a lot of books.
Right. Would you be interested in that if opportunities presented themselves for you to come and be like a guest
I
speaker?
keep saying to my publisher, the coming thing now, post in quotes COVID, are in-person conventions of a variety of weirdness. Of course, John Tenney just calls it weirdness, and I think he or his doppelganger appears at virtually all of these conventions, even if they're at the same time in different cities, a continent apart. How does he do that? He's John Tenney. Actually, I met him at one of our conventions when he was but a callow youth, and I was the mature ufologist there, in charge of the convention when we held it in Atlanta.
Never saw it coming.
No, yeah, he saw it coming. Who didn't see it coming? Me. I shared a table with Jim Keith, and it happened that the hotel that we were having this convention at, which was well attended, we spent 12 grand on it, and we made 12 grand. So it was.
Isn't that all of them though?
Well, no, the best and largest still to date, I think, was the 1967 Summer of Love, June 24th, 1967, at a hotel which Trump tore down, a great old hotel in New York City where we had 12,000 people, which is interesting because Dr. Condon was there. I mean, that was almost your last chance to meet the classical contactees. Howard Minger was there. The love candidate for president, Louis Abelafia, was there because it was the summer of love. And actually, that's a side story. Also, we were infiltrated by people from the East Village Other, the underground newspaper of that period. And I guess they were looking for, whatever it was that we were doing in secret. And what
something
we did
salacious.
I don't think any of us in 1967 did any drugs other than alcohol, where we would get very, very inebriated. 2 years later, we were all hippies, even the older generation people. Like, somewhere in the Gray Barker collection is a filmlet. Gray was in the audiovisual business by day and Saucerian publications by night. So he had one of the first video recorders. So he and Jim Moseley would get together and get very, very drunk and pull all sorts of mischief because they hated the pomposity of nuts and bolts ufology, mostly engineering types who saw their own reflection. This is engineering because we can land something on Mars, which is that my, no, it's, if they came this early, F them. you know. Did I say that right? On most shows,
I mean,
but
there's no limits here, so you're you're free and
You're
clear to
well,
good.
you're representing
oh,
yourself.
okay. Well, you asked for it because the Newkirks, God bless them, who did invite me to one of their COVID conventions, so it was online, called me in the leaflets, Alan fucking Greenfield. So I took that to
Beautiful.
heart, and I often describe myself as, oh, yes, I'm Alan fucking Greenfield. Glad to meet you.
Hey,
Want to
man.
buy a book? My book on sex magic. Don't forget, it's my middle name. You know,
You know what? I feel bad because I read 2 of your books before you came on, and I didn't know about the Grail Within, which is the sex magic one. And man, I didn't want to. I'm obviously not going to postpone the interview like we're doing it now. But if I could have read that before today, I would have. And I'm going to read
I'm a
it
big
immediately
fan of sex
thereafter.
magic, so I've never I had no idea you wrote a book about it. I'm bad, I guess.
no, you're just ignorant of my book.
That's true. That's true.
But I think it's, there are a lot of books now about sex magic, which must make the OTO horribly unhappy because all they have to offer is the central secret. And there's dozens of books that pretty much reveal what really started out with P.B. Randolph in the 19th century. But my book starts out giving the theory, which they all do, and then it talks about my own personal experiences with no gilding of the lily and no fig leaves. Hard to write, believe me, because I was talking about my own experiences with various people. And I don't believe there's any other book where, with the possible exception of a very old book by Lewis Culling, who the grand poobah of the OTO said, "You're the only person that ever got anything out of Lewis Culling's books," to which I just smiled, because he talked a little bit about his own experiences, but I talked in most of the book about mine. And hard to do because some of them are relatively bizarre. But I recommend the book. In fact, the one program that I did a while back when the book was first released, which was earlier this year. I mean, I'm talking like, came out long ago, and really the only prequel to it was kind of the draft version, which I distributed by hand free to 93 persons, which is an important in the Thelemic universe, that I thought were advanced initiates in my OTO days. That isn't DAYS, that's DAZE.
Yeah.
MOUSE. I got my ears, got my hat. What a hat. Reach right out. Time is near. You're an honorary palm Thelemite. Big deal.
No, that's
There are still Musketeers living, including the one I had a crush on when I was a kid, Darlene Gillespie. I hope she's still with us.
Britney Spears was a Musketeer.
Second group of Musketeers. I'm talking about
The original.
the original from the 50s when I was but a lad. Most people had a crush on Annette, who is long gone, but because she was well endowed at an early age. But
charging sigils through orgasm is like probably one of the first magic rituals that I was introduced to, and I had picked up on that through Grant Morrison, who was a comic book writer. He's still a comic book writer now, but he was doing a series called The Invisibles in the late 90s, early 2000s. So that was a huge...
Did an issue on my mentor, Michael Bertio, so, I mean, it was totally devoted to Bertio's mythos, and I don't mean that as in it isn't real. I mean that he's one of the few people before me who grasped that there are other universes. And
Do you
the
remember
first
because
time
I reread that like once every couple years. I have like the big omnibus they put out, and I'll try to reread it. I mean, I'm due for another one anyway, but that was huge for me as far as exposing me to like a lot of this stuff. And Morrison had a letter column, like a just like at the end of every issue where he would like write to the audience and stuff, and he would talk about the different chaos magic stuff that he would do. And that was kind of how I first picked up on it, because I can draw a bunch of squiggly lines and I can jerk off. So if that means that I can do magic, like, cool. Um, but the fact that you wrote a whole entire book dedicated to it, I would definitely like to check out, because that
yeah, there were
seems a lot
things
more
I
in
did.
depth. Seems a lot more in depth than that.
I didn't put this because I'm very careful about this sort of thing. It's very sensitive, and that Dr. Reich went to prison because of essentially the same thing. But at one point, I did a talisman, which was, it's important that it be consecrated by the fluids of both a male and female practitioner, because my mother had cancer, and this was designed to cure that, which, I mean, she had minimal conventional therapy. And the only thing I did other than the sigil and give it to her was, and not tell her exactly how it was consecrated. Not that she wouldn't have. I mean, she read every. I learned about sex from her books being left, because she,
Oh,
they called it unexpurgated, which was something that was big in the 50s. You know, it's like Henry Miller, there was a court ruling or something back when there was a Supreme Court that was worth something, sort of, if you don't mind, appointments for life, like the King of England, which I thought we had a revolution about, but that's neither here nor there. He was a crazy guy. But so is Emma Cody.
My mom had a copy of Our Body Ourselves on her bookshelf.
The
That
point
I
is, she she no longer had any symptoms whatsoever, and to the day she passed away from a totally unrelated thing in her 80s, she was cancer free, and she had, by definition, metastatic cancer. But please don't write me for one of those, okay? I can't do magic for myself for some reason, but I don't want to get into the cancer business at all. I don't feel like that's my department. And the 5 years I spent working for the Psychic Friends Network, you know, there was romance, finance, and health, and it's a very challenging thing to deal with, and I prefer not to do that one. In fact, the consecration I had, I stopped using the term bishop, because in the 10 years that I did the Arabia working, people would come and ask to be empowered. And I realized a lot of these people were taking it to be something that was a specific religious thing. And that's not what I was doing at all. I don't know that it doesn't have implications for spirituality, but what I was doing was empowerments, which are non-sectarian. You could be an atheist or a fundamentalist or somewhere in between, or a follower of Baba Ram Das, or one of the many gurus that descended upon America. And still, I mean, we had a Tibetan monk come to one of our events. And in 10 years, we did a lot of empowering, you know, a lot of empowering up there. But people would go away and form a church, and I'm not trying to do that. So
right.
I have what was it that Kenneth Grant said? we've put aside the Masonic initiations without uh, voiding the Masonic dignities that we have, meaning he could still call himself a, ninth degree, 97th degree, whatever, all of those things, because that's, as AMORC used to say in their ads, not a religious organization.
With ceremonial magic or sex magic or any that kind of stuff, do you feel that you're actually invoking the intercession of an outside force, or do you think that you're bending reality to your own will?
Yes.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I just assumed that the universe, to the extent that we can know it, is one. And I based that mostly on quantum physics and the concept of quantum entanglement, which, by the way, just got its first actual scientific proof. Interesting theory, but it's the first experiment, just I read about it today, by total synchronicity. And the fact is that I think everything in the universe is interconnected, almost as if it were a super brain, So there are all sorts of hints of that, like you were mentioning chaos theory. Chaos theory and spin-off chaos magic is based on the notion that ordo ab chao, as they say in Freemasonry and on the back of the dollar bill, I think, right under the pyramid. But because in the 18th century you had to know Latin or you were just an ignorant peasant.
Well, that was up until the 60s. That was up until just recently. They did the Catholic.
Oh, yeah. When I was in high school, Latin was not compulsory, but was like one of the languages you could take. And they incentivized that by having a toga week. So Belushi wasn't the first or the last. I mean, there I was, everybody, all the boys had to wear ROTC uniforms because if you were a boy attending high school in those days, especially in the South, it was compulsory ROTC right up until you were 18. And the next year you were eligible for the draft and off to Vietnam. I declined to make that particular decision. I said I was allergic to wool, which I was, and the uniforms were wool, so I passed on ROTC. Where did I get to that from? Toga!
Yeah.
Ashers, please tell me you have a question because I feel bad. I'm asking.
Oh gosh.
I feel like I'm doing too much talking here.
I have 10 million, I guess.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. So we're closing in on our hour mark. Let's kind of start. We've talked a lot about a lot of the things that some of the things that you've done, some fun stories. What are you doing nowadays? What do you got planned in the future? What does Alan fucking Greenfield have going on in his future days?
Well, at my age, fucking is not the. Although, as the whore on the street corner said, I'm available. That's for conventions, God, I say some things on the air that embarrass even me.
Oh no, you should come to
you're
the
a
show
good
sometime,
company.
really.
You're a good company.
Yeah.
So actually, the major focus of my work at this point is the very difficult process that my publisher is shouldering a great deal of. And it is the yet untitled book on the Black Lodge and the secret cipher of the Ufonauts. Plug. Because I really had designed Secret Cipher to be a trilogy, but because the Black Lodge, in the person of the Grand Poobah of the OTO, basically applied pressure to me not to publish any more UFO books, or I might lose a Grand Lodge office in the OTO.
Oh.
He told me that hovering above a key portal in North Georgia, driving me back to Atlanta from where he was. He's always hiding somewhere, staying, and he lectured me on how the occult is respectable and we're looking for respectability, but UFOs are not respectable. Well, I know what the statistics are, and
Wow.
I know what campus stuff is, and the occult is doo-doo, as Michael Jackson put it in court so eloquently, whereas UFOs have a growing respectability, and now it has an enormous respectability despite UFO hunters and all those things on the History Channel that they put on, ghost hunters, UFO hunters, hunters, whatever, that when they ran out of World War II stock footage, that was the replacement. I know. I did several of those shows and wrote an editorial about it and was never invited to another one. I don't know why. I just called them all acting because that's what they are. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, and on the ghost hunter thing, which I didn't do, the ghost hunters are usually plumbers from New Jersey who, when they get in a building, an old building that has rats in the wall, they hear the sound of scuttling rats and they go, let's get our equipment out and find out what this is. Yeah, right. Ask the Newkirks about that. It's just...
Yeah, the guys that I were talking to this weekend, they went, I asked them like the different places they went to, and they went to like, closed sanatoriums and Joliet Prison, which is closed down. Then they mentioned they went to the leather archives in Chicago. So we have like a real big leather community here, and there's a leather museum of like all of the stuff from IML from like the past 30 years. And I had a friend that did a documentary about the leather scene in Chicago, and she told me that museum was haunted, or that they thought that it was haunted, but she felt like it was more residual energy from all the stuff that they keep in the museum. And when the guys mentioned that they went there, I immediately perked up. I'm like, tell me all about it. What was it like, And they were like, oh, it was there wasn't really anything going on. It was kind of not really that interesting. And I'm thinking, you were the two wrongest motherfuckers to be looking for ghosts in a leather museum. Like, you ever think maybe that has something to do with it? Like, you wouldn't know what a pussy was if it crawled up your face and sat on your nose. Like, what the fuck did you think you were going to find in there? Which made me want to go back. I was like, well, if they just let you walk around there and videotape shit, I'll do that. Because I'm not saying that I would be that much better of a conduit, but I'd at least know how to talk to the people, I would think, or whatever.
Did they have on leather pants and a leather shirt?
That's what they have,
and
in the
holding their thing, their detector in one hand, and they're whipping another. But that's in the book. It's in the book. It's just briefly in the book. So that's.
I wanted to ask because I have past acquaintances that have been associated with the OTO temple here in Chicago.
Merciful Jesus!
What was just recreationally? But what was your connection here? Because I did see that you were. Did you live here for a little bit, or
no?
I was passed through, or you were a member of the.
That was in Chicago.
Yeah.
I have a number of Chicago stories. It's the town that Billy Sunday couldn't close down. In Chicago,
right.
That title in town. But you would know it, but it's now obscure. But in my early days in ufology, I got kicked out of the NICAP office in D.C. with Gene Steinberg, another one of the survivors of my generation, and still doing his podcast. And who else was with me? Rick Hillberg, who's still around in Cleveland. I recommend getting in touch with Rick. Rick is a MUFON historian, but he's not a nuts and bolts person. He is more advanced than that. Now, I mean, we all were nuts and bolts people, in the early
Yeah.
60s. It's where, if you're 14 and hearing Project Blue Book propaganda and or NICAP or APRO propaganda, that was pre-MUFON. That's what you were. They came from Mars, and they were just like the things we were trying to develop, coincidentally. Since I don't believe in coincidences, it's all synchronicity. But where was I going with that? Have you noticed that old people tend to ramble a lot?
You make for great podcast guests, though, because you fill the time.
Yeah, there I'm popular, but not for in-person conventions, because I tend to consider my appearance a failure if half the audience doesn't leave in disgust. I start out with the famous line from a first-gen ufologist, Brad Steiger, I think it was, or was it? Good grief! How soon they forget. Everything you know is wrong. But that was the title of one of the books by. Don't tell me. Brains.
You can do this.
Brains.
I believe in you.
I believe in me too, but I don't believe in forgetting stuff like that on the air. I know his name, but I'm not going to reveal it. But then this guy, Bob Wilson, he always called me, no matter what context he saw me in, the UFO guy. He once saw me do a Gnostic mask, because that was during my OTO days. And right after it, he came out and asking about why I didn't mention certain Gnostic saints, which it didn't call for because they were italicized in the Crowley script, and they're only for high masses or the unofficial non-symbolic masses, of which I have attended quite a few. Shh! Don't tell anybody. When they say non-symbolic, they mean non-symbolic. The lance goes in the cup and the particle goes into the cup. A bell rings. As they say, you don't have to be, a train goes into a tunnel. You don't have to be Fellini to figure that one out.
Gotcha. What is your take on the modern UAP disclosure thing that's going on right now with the government? Is it genuine, or is it what is?
I think that the change of terminology is suspicious, because UFO has come to be the equivalent of flying saucer. UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, basically makes it a non-thing. And having been through the University of Colorado era, and having the head of the project, Dr. Condon, attend our convention and then basically trash the whole subject after several years, I'm not sure that this is not, we figured this all out. It's all from China.
Yeah.
Or whatever. I don't think there's any reason to believe that the U.S. government knows more about flying saucers than I do. And I always say, if you want to have disclosure, talk to a ufologist that doesn't have an axe to grind, but has reached conclusions based on the phenomena, not based on their own inclinations or wishes or any of that kind of thing, including all they do is what Blue Book and before that Grudge and before that Project Sign ever did was create the false dichotomy. They're either natural phenomena or they're flying saucers from outer space. Ding! Oh, well, the three people working at Right Pat were, let's see, there was a middle-ranking officer, usually a very skeptical person, a subordinate, usually an enlisted man, Air Force personnel, and a secretary. That was it. That was Project Blue Book.
Yep.
So where are they better equipped to deal with flying saucers than I am and my then network of, 50 or 100 scattered people who investigated cases with gradually no preconceptions at all. Just what we saw, what we heard was just modified our opinions. And it's still, I would be easy if somebody came up with another notion. But when I encountered the connection with cryptids and ghosts and other paranormal phenomena, I realized, and then the connection to quantum physics, I realized that this is probably all one thing under various guises. That was not a quick decision, but it was where I am now, always with everything with me, subject to additional information, which might change my mind.
How long did it take you to come to the conclusion that these things were not only connected, but connected to science that we vaguely recognize?
I'm not so sure it's that vague anymore because, in the news feed, there's a story about quantum computing every other day. And
Yeah.
I mean, it just the notion involves quantum entanglement or there would be no advantage to quantum computing. And there are also stories about all sorts of quantum phenomena because the rock bottom idea is the universe is not as it seems and is not just, about, I've got about 7 minutes left to tell you the secret of immortality. The secret of immortality is King Viserys. That's for all of you Dance of Dragons fans, which I watch religiously because it's the only fantasy I can get into,
I haven't watched it since the time jump. I'm like 3 episodes behind. I watched the first 4 or 5 where they're young, and then it shoots forward, and they use a different actress for the girl. I haven't seen.
I'll give you a brief review. Great show, very entertaining, but the wigs that look like mops on people's heads and probably are is a poor special effects. The cityscapes that they show are not a really good special effect, and the dragon riders seen at a distance so you can see the dragon look like toy toy figures. So I would suggest they really put some money behind their effects crew because plotline is, really good, really challenging, and very dark, which I tend to like.
Sure.
But also, as was true in Game of Thrones and is true throughout that corpus of books published and unpublished at this point. That's fine, but you really need to have effects that are up to the Game of Thrones level. In what was it, 7 years, 8 years, I only saw a couple of things that pulled me out of the screen. And that looks like they really didn't use their effects effectively. Most of the time it was flawless. I can only think of one where a guy is pushed into the water and it suddenly turns into one of those little people who show up in Dance of Dragons. And but the mops really bug me, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, they could get wigs that fit, you know, but if you're going to do dreadlocks, you'd best do dreadlocks that look like dreadlocks, not like there's something you polish the floor with. There may be an underlying meaning there that I don't particularly like, you know, something.
It's funny you bring that up because they remember the last couple seasons they would have issues with like Starbucks cups making their way into scenes, or
It
like
only happened once, but
yeah, yeah, where like I don't know if they're rushed in the production where they're on set and they're not paying attention, and then they're editing it together in post and they got to rush to get it out and they're not paying attention. But usually you catch stuff like that, and for they missed a couple. And I know the cup was one, but there was other stuff I remember people the internet picking them apart for too, where it was like just continuity stuff making its way into the background of shots, you know.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, the general consensus among hardcore fans is the two guys that were in the current parlance, showrunners uh, at that time really were in a hurry to get rid of the series because they thought they were going to Disney, which didn't work out.
yeah,
But
to get Star Wars.
but they didn't. I
Yeah,
mean, they gave it to someone else, which is good. As long as they were following the books and adapting them, which is, you know, you don't want to slavishly follow books. You want to adapt because television and literature aren't the same thing. My eldest son is a screenwriter, so I have some, you know, some sense of what's good and what's not. Uh, Interesting business. But they were in a hurry to finish. So they really looked hurried and too cute by half in the seventh season. I may be garbling this slightly because I'm not a hardcore fan. I'm
sure.
just a fan, you know. And in the last season, they completely blew it. I mean, it was just an embarrassing ending that left all sorts of entangled, angry fans out there who probably would have burned these guys at the stake if they could have gotten a hold of them. Instead, they ran it on YouTube for months, put out a petition to redo those episodes, and got 1 million signatures. HBO doesn't pay much attention to petitions,
Yeah,
apparently, but
that's not going to happen. But
no. Well,
what's your
one
favorite thing?
time it did happen with Star Trek, the original Star Trek.
Oh, when they brought the movie back, or when they did the motion
No,
picture?
no, they brought the TV show back for a third season. They had canceled it, and I don't know how many signatures they got, but they got a lot for that period of time.
Yeah.
So they brought it back for a third season and put it on at an hour that most of the younger fans couldn't see. So, you know, it was doomed, but it got an extra season. And since then, petitions have become a thing. And I tell you, they don't work anymore.
Right.
It's a one-time, one-trick pony.
Ashers.
So I'm almost out of time, which is fortunate because I'm almost out of things to say unless you ask me some really challenging question. Like, do you
what's your
really
favorite
believe this shit?
what's your favorite thing your kid's written?
Earthquake 10.0, which
He does
is,
the like the Sci-Fi Channel movies.
yeah, that kind of thing. I mean, almost you can find most of his films now, which I wish he got residuals on, but I don't think he does. His
That's
best is kind of a salute to Roger Corman, but it's so I want to call it Blood Beach because it is modeled on that, but that was like early 1960s, and he was not even a gleam in my eye in the early 1960s. But what was the name of that movie? The Sand, and that is on either Prime or yeah, I think it's on Prime and on HBO Max in perpetuity, sort of. So most of his films are on there.
oh no, it looks
And
like he's a writer for WWE too. That's awesome.
He was with WWE. He's now
Yeah.
with another wrestling federation. That's what he does in his off time. Even though there's no such thing as a script writer in wrestling, because wrestling is the real thing.
Oh yeah,
The real thing.
I'm sure the
100%.
In
sand
the
looks
back of your
badass.
mind.
You heard it here
What you're
first.
hoping to find is the real thing. Coca-Cola. Do I get a ready cough? Complete Secret Cipher of the Ufonauts. And what is that other book? The Filthy Guide to Sex Magic. No, that isn't the name of it.
Oh no, it's the Grail Within, I think.
Yeah, The Grail Within. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't do titles. I don't, you know, once I've written, I have no control over pricing or titles or proofreading or any of that. So
Yeah.
Sure.
No,
don't blame me just for the writing.
no, they're real good, and they're all available on Amazon, Amazon Prime. Order it, you'll get it the next day.
Including one that I didn't write that's under my name, something, The History of Witchcraft or something.
Oh,
Witchcraft
That's,
Secrets Revealed. Yeah.
yeah, you can buy it. And some of the material is stuff that I wrote on my old web page, the traditional ones before social media came to dominate social media. I mean,
sure.
back in the day when there wasn't really Twitter or Facebook or Snapchat or TikTok.
Yeah, you want to look up Alan H. Greenfield on Amazon, and that gives you
Or
like
T. Allen Greenfield or whatever.
okay.
I always say, just Google my name. It's Allen. That was my parents, not Alan. Allen Greenfield, Greenfield. And you'll see thousands of entries, some of which relate to the truth, others of which don't. Like the Wikipedia piece on me, which, you can't contribute to your own Wikipedia piece. But as I often say, before Hellier, I was almost obscure. After Hellier, I'm almost famous, but not quite.
And after this podcast, you'll be I don't know, nothing. It's not gonna. This isn't gonna move your dial.
You'll still be
Anyway.
almost famous, but not quite.
Yeah, well, that's what I do.
A couple hundred more people know who you are. That's it, though.
Yeah, well, a couple hundred people
Couple
is
hundred,
a
I
couple
don't-
hundred books. So
Yeah.
if you don't have it, buy it, or you're
Yes.
missing out.
And I can recommend them. I've read Saucers and Sorcerers and Secret Cipher, or the complete Secret Cipher, not the incomplete Secret Cipher. I've read both of those, and they're good.
If Saucers and Sorcerers makes you envious of the old days in ufology, it succeeds in what it's trying to do, because
100%. Yeah.
it was a sort of fraternity back then.
Well, I think
And like science fiction fandom, it just got too big and too commercial to really be that anymore. But
I think it's an important lesson for people that are interested in and being in this space now, to have a sense of history and where all this stuff came from and how we should conduct ourselves moving forward, because events are still a big part of it. And this is a book. It's about a lot of things, but it's also about the convention circuit and how that was run back in the day, and how that was the forefront of everything. And these used to be great places for a meeting of the minds and an exchange of information and ideas, and that it shouldn't just be about selling T-shirts and doing whatever.
in fact, we didn't have dealers' tables or anything like that at our conventions, and the price of admission was like $5 or $10 for the weekend. I mean, we were not in it. We were in it to pay for the hall,
right,
that we held it in, and the speakers were not paid. I think a couple of years towards the end, they were, if they came from distant places.
sure.
But it would have qualified as a nonprofit organization, but never applied for that status. We just did our thing. out of the true meaning of the word amateur for the love of it.
And you did it well.
Thank you. Now I will fade into the darkness.
Yep.
All right, I should say your goodbye thing so I can start downloading this track.
All right. Well, guys, that was Alan fucking Greenfield. You can go buy his books, and you absolutely should. Of course, he is on social media, and I'll put all the links down in the description for you guys to find him if you somehow don't know who he is by now and you listen to the show. But until then, we'll see you guys back here next Wednesday.